This is episode 52 of the Our Town podcast, just rolling right along. And even though 52 would suggest there's 52 weeks in a year, and I've been at it for a year, it's actually been just under or just over 10 months, just less than 11 months. So we've had a few episodes. I try to do one a week, but there's been a few times where we've done 2 a week. And that just basically depends on the guest schedule and availability. And that is no different today as I'm going to introduce Amy Bailey to you all, who is a Huntsville native, right?
Right.
And moved away. We'll talk about that and came back. But it's been fun to meet a lot of I've interviewed a lot of Huntsville natives on this program.
Nice.
Many of which you probably know. And then as I did research on you, which was an easy thing to do. Amy Lemley Bailey is the name you kind of. Lemley's your maiden name, right?
Right.
And did you have a middle name? Or
Beth.
Mm-hmm. But you don't. So you're not using the 4 Amy Beth Lemley Bailey.
No.
Okay. The Lemley works well. In fact, that must have been nice when you. Of course, I'm not. My wife, her maiden name was Souther, and at some point when you meet a man and if you decide to change your name, that's probably an interesting thing that goes through your mind. But Bailey or Lemley to Bailey's, that's a pretty good trade. You're really only trading out 3 letters.
Right.
So it's been fun to interview these natives. And then as I saw some of the pictures that are like on your MyScoop Instagram, and we'll talk about MyScoop later, then there's like, oh, I know Karen Peterson. I'm going to interview her soon.
Right.
And there you are standing. So I can't wait to talk to Amy about how she knows Karen. But first and foremost, how are you doing as we are somewhat being teased with spring weather here in February?
Isn't it something?
It is.
And so I remember when we lived in Birmingham, we would have these early springs, and it would get warm in February, and I loved it. And
really?
So it's interesting that maybe it's a cyclical thing.
Yeah.
Because we've had some pretty cold winters these past few years.
So this is something you have experienced before. I was up in the Mid-Atlantic region, Northern Virginia,
right,
most of my life, and what I tell people is it's generally just a little bit warmer here all throughout the year. It will get a little warmer and a little more intense with humidity during the summer, but it's not very different than the Mid-Atlantic climate. But and if there's a difference, we just get more. There's a better chance you're going to get those extreme colds up there, right? Versus here, it doesn't seem to get extremely cold.
Right.
But then at the same time, I feel like spring's going to come a little sooner, right? All the seasons come a little sooner, and maybe the duration is longer. Do you feel like that's kind of accurate based on living many of your years here?
I do. And I do feel like of the cities in Alabama, Huntsville gets the most seasons. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like Birmingham, everything blurs a little together, and here I feel like we get a little bit of a winter and a spring and then a hot summer, of course.
Yeah. And if you're not familiar with Alabama, I was actually just on a call yesterday that my Mantech, the company I work for, and we're headquartered up in Virginia. So I have a lot of calls.
Okay.
With different teams and stuff that are up there, and they always assume, like someone said, "Oh, you're close to the equator down there." Like, we're not at the beach.
No.
In fact, the beach is a good 5 hours away from here. So if you can just look at a map, and you'll see that Huntsville is almost to Tennessee. It is way up there.
Oh yeah, people have no idea that haven't been here.
So let's there's a million different ways, and let me just say this. I've tried to somewhat articulate this to other guests, and I'm realizing now this is almost somewhat like therapy for me, or it's just time well spent. When you spend time preparing to interview a guest, doing some research, I try really hard to approach this differently than any other time you're going to get interviewed, the content that we'll talk about, because you're setting aside time from a busy life and a new exciting adventure that you have going that we'll talk about at length. So I want to make this worth your time, but it's so fun I had not met you till now as far as face to face. We've interacted over email, Allison Cannon, shout out to her. She's the one that connected us.
Yes.
And I met her through Dr. Joe Donato at the Cyber Summit. She was walking by. He knows her because she's in the banking industry. And he says, hey, Allison, come here. You need to meet Troy. He has a podcast. I think at the time I had just finished like episode 28, 29. And you've got to get on his podcast. So then we met kind of for, coffee, hot chocolate. And she, I think, was in transition and like leaving her job. So I don't think she was in a place where she wanted to be on the program, but she referred you, to me.
Yeah.
And so then that kind of launched into me kind of preparing for today. And I got to say, no matter what you think you might know about Amy Lemley Bailey, there's a tremendous amount of the cool thing about like somebody who's in journalism and lifestyle and, you write and you're published and that kind of stuff. Not only does somebody have a resume and they can embellish that, they can say whatever they want on a resume. But when you are in your industry and your profession and your craft, it's all there as far as what you wrote, the style of writing, the volume of writing, the frequency, where it's a lot of hard work. And that's the kind of stuff I'm really interested in diving into. Is you took some risks where you leave and go to New York. That's a risky thing. That takes some courage. It takes some guts. And you get married, spend some time in Birmingham. Now you're up here. So that's just it's like an active, full life, and that's what's going to be fun to explore that today with you. So I really look forward to these things. It just gets me excited at and part of that is just the great people that are here. And there's so many great people here, and it's fun to bring out and put a little bit more color on their story. If that makes sense.
Yes, thank you.
So let's start with like high school, if you will, or even before, and this concept where people have labeled you the fashionista. I think I read in the Birmingham Wiki. You're on a wiki page,
right?
Where they kind of go through on who you are and the stuff you were doing. But when does this talent you have, an eye for fashion or decor or whatever you label it, when does that start for you?
Well, it truly starts in my grandmother's sewing house.
Okay.
So my grandparents lived in New Hope, Alabama, and they lived a very, very simple life, and they were not wealthy in any way. And
where's New Hope, by the way?
It is south of Huntsville, towards Gunnersville.
Okay.
You pass through New Hope on the way to
okay.
Gunnersville. And they lived in a little cinder block house, and my grandmother really wanted a sewing house, so she was a seamstress. And
this is your grandma, whose also first name was Amy.
Yes.
Okay.
Who I'm named after.
Right.
Yes. And she loved to sew, and she could sew anything. I mean, when I got older, I would pull things out of very high-end magazines, and I would say, can you do this? And she would figure out how to do it. And so she just had this extraordinary talent, and they had, with that, she decided she wanted just a little workroom for herself. And so I don't know if it was modular or I can't remember exactly, but she had just this little sewing house beside their house where she had her sewing machines. And she also had shelf after shelf of just patterns from the 60s, the 70s. And it was sort of my solace. Your middle school, high school, those are very hard years. And so spending time with her and, of course, someone who loved me so deeply was very important. And I would go into that sewing house and just take out those patterns and just became fascinated with the styles of clothes. And so that truly triggered this interest in passion. It sort of, gave me something to aspire to dream about. And so as I got older and had, different magazine experiences and lived in New York, and all of that sort of compiled to have MyScoop, which was very style focused. And
now, this is your was this your father's mother?
Yes.
Okay, so it's your paternal grandmother. And then was she making clothes for profit, but then also I'm going to imagine she was doing a lot of nonprofit or just charitable stuff for the church, or just making clothes for people, and just being a very kind-hearted, generous woman?
Yes. So she did a lot of alterations, and then she would make clothes for people too. But the prices that she would charge were,
enough just to cover costs.
Next to nothing.
Yeah.
Right. She had this very humble mentality, and I remember her often saying, just surprised at the cost of different things, and because that our grandparents witnessed a huge transition from when they were growing up, and inflation and increasing prices.
Do you recall, like, in talking with her, like, how old was she during the Great Depression? Was that a significant?
Oh, goodness. I should know that off the top of my head.
That's all right. It's getting harder and harder to estimate that. You meet someone, and it used to be easy for me. Like, right. You just do some quick math, and like, your grandfather probably was in World War I or World War II, right? Now it's like, it gets harder for me to do that. But if you don't know, that's okay.
I believe she was probably a teenager, or just right there.
Yeah.
Around, yeah.
It would just be. It's just, I think that was an amazing generation of people that grew up in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. That were, there was all this explosion, of course, of like new technology and stuff, but there was also wartime,
right,
and the Great Depression, where you're trying to learn to be self-sufficient and really appreciate food, maybe growing your own food, cutting costs, whatever, because that was a significant,
right. Well,
somewhat tragedy in our country.
She was one of 10 children, and they picked cotton. That was part of their duty of the land they maintained. They all had to get out there and pick cotton.
So when you worked alongside her, she taught you how to sew and different things, and then did she share stories with you?
She did teach me how to sew.
Okay.
I do not have the patience that she had.
Right.
It's amazing to me, and I've often thought, as I've gotten older, is that something that I want to dive back into one day. I did for a short time design dresses for myself and some friends.
Okay.
And it was pretty awesome, but it very time consuming, takes a lot of patience.
Yeah. All right. So now let's kind of I really want to get to your college years. Because I got some stuff that's fun, but
oh yay!
Did you get heavy into like fashion merchandising? Were there some courses that were offered? I say that because I never took it, but I knew a lot of kids who did, and I would go on field trips with the fashion merchandising. We would go up to like Pennsylvania, where there's a lot of outlet malls, or they went up to New York City. It was like their big trip of every year to see the fashion industry, right, and do some shopping, but. In high school, were you the best dressed? Were you just bringing in like new style and being like a trendsetter and an influencer?
In high school, I was certainly trying.
Yeah.
But again, we lived very modestly, and so I didn't have a lot of funds to do a lot and dress necessarily over the top, but I certainly always tried. And even with my grandmother, we made several things together that were inspired by 1970s patterns.
Okay.
And so that was very different than anything anyone was wearing at
Bell
that
bottoms?
point in time.
Like, were you wearing?
There were like matching, like vest and flared pants, and to me, I didn't understand why more of that wasn't an option. Like, that looked pretty cool to me. How did that go out of style? And I grew up in the 90s, and fashion just wasn't very fun,
So did you like show up to school on a couple different occasions, and you're in a completely different, something that was kind of completely against the normal trend? And
for sure.
What? Like somewhat of an attention grabber, right? And did people come up to you and the young ladies and like, hey, so that's pretty cool. Where did you get that?
Oh, for sure. and not always cool, you know.
Yeah.
Like,
It probably it takes a while for that to process.
Right.
You kind of stare at that, right?
Right.
With certain things.
You know, that was when I guess Gap and Abercrombie and Fitch and all those things were cool. So
Banana Republic.
Right.
All right, so now let's. I have so much I want to get to. So as much as I would love to spend more and more time on your childhood, if we have time, we'll come back to it. I'm not sure if we will.
Okay.
But let's talk about this decision. Well, no, let's go to Montevallo. Montevallo. I speak Spanish like pretty fluently.
Right.
So when I see the double L, I want to say Vallo.
Right.
Right. That's the correct way to say it. So you go to college down there. So what were your choices when it came to you're leaving high school? You're trying to decide what to do. It looks like you went on that kind of traditional. You went away for 4 years. It wasn't interrupted. You graduate high school, right? 4 years later, you're done with college.
Right.
What was going through your mind on what your options were?
Well, I didn't want to go to Alabama or Auburn because those seemed very overwhelming. Those were very big schools, and I felt like so many people I grew up with were going to those schools. I wanted to do something different. Mm-hmm. And so I had looked at smaller schools. And I will say, too, I always enjoyed school, mm-hmm. and I made good grades, but looking back, I wish I had been a more serious student because I certainly got caught up in the social aspect a little too much and all those things. And for whatever reason, you know, sort of deterring from the social aspect, I decided to go to a very small school and where people I did not know were going. And I feel like that set up the trajectory to have this mindset of just doing something different mm-hmm. and meeting new people and expanding my outlet of people. And even though Montevallo was small, there were people from all over the state and outside the state. And so it was different than just moving with my graduating high school class onto a university where everyone else was going to.
I think that makes sense. So a little trepidation about going somewhere big.
Right.
I want to go somewhere maybe, was there still also like within the state was important to you and maybe not too far away from family?
Well, in-state tuition was a big thing for my family.
Makes sense.
Right.
Okay. So you get down there and I don't know if you've ever seen the yearbook. Have you seen the yearbook?
I have. It's been a long time.
Well, I think I have it here.
Awesome.
And here, I just took a few pages from it.
Oh.
And this is, well, it says I don't know where you are in these shots, but I took a few shots from it. So you're in the beauty pageant, and it says, I might have to put glasses on, that the young women who participated in the pageant competed for $775 worth of scholarships, and then the winner got $550. Is that right? No, the winner got $775. Right?
I believe so.
And then the first alternate was $550, and then so on. And then it says that participating in the pageant were Jennifer, this is where I can't see it, Eubanks, Anichi Walker, Angela Smith, and Amy Lemley.
Yes.
Amongst it. So do you see yourself in this picture?
I do not.
Okay, so let me go down.
Now, let's see.
Might have to.
Okay. Oh, I think, is that me?
Are you in the middle shot?
That's so blurry.
I know. It came from there. Back then we didn't have like HD photography, right?
I think in the white dress photo, I'm on the far left.
Far left?
Yes.
Now,
and then the winner of that pageant is actually one of my dearest friends to this day. Yes. She lives in New York now, by the way.
So, really?
Yes.
So talk me through what you remember about the competition. Like you have a talent competition, there's a swimsuit competition, and the evening gown? Or those like the three categories?
Yes.
Do you remember that pretty well?
Not really at all. I do remember that my grandmother made most of my outfits.
Okay.
Yes. She even came down to Montevallo with her sewing machine and made most of the outfits.
That's pretty cool.
Yes.
What was your talent portion? Does that
I think it was theater. I think I did a monologue. I'm almost certain I did a monologue.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Here's another shot. This is a Phi Mu.
Yes.
I might have
my
to.
sorority.
This is a little bit chopped. Okay. So Phi Mu, and I believe you are laying down in that shot with those other girls.
Yes.
Somewhere.
Yes.
But I can't make out. Do you know where you are?
The vest with the it's light. Do you want me to point? I can
Sure.
point right there.
This one here.
That's me. Yes.
Okay. That's pretty cool. It's always fun, like when the yearbook comes out and
I think
you thumb through the pages.
I think I'm in all those. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
This is
That's me.
there you are.
Mm-hmm.
And this is let's see, what is this again? This is your sorority?
Yes. Same.
Okay.
That was
and
a
you're here
formal.
like third from the right.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Then oh, you know what? There was a picture that I didn't get. There was a one in theater that I had, and you weren't pictured in this, but it says you were an Alpha Epsilon Rho.
I believe so.
Okay.
Yes.
Isn't it amazing?
I'm
like
barely
here it is.
remembering some of these things.
This is you
look
sitting
at
with. I
that.
guess that's the teacher, the professor. You're sitting on the couch.
I have no idea. I have no recollection of this.
It says
whatsoever.
Bob Hall first captures the audience's attention by asking several questions and waiting for feedback. By doing this, he was able to figure out how much students already knew about the pressures of dating. And then it's Amy Lemley takes part in Bob Hoff's lecture. So I guess he pulled you from the crowd.
I guess so.
Well, there you go.
Oh, that's so
like
funny.
a walk down memory lane
I
a
know.
little bit, right?
Now I'm going to be racking my brain trying to remember who Bob Hall is.
Now you can, maybe he was an administrator. I guess now you can go and look at the whole yearbook online.
Yes.
That's not the
How
easiest
about
thing to find.
that?
Yeah. Those things are not always. It's interesting how like a high school could have been around for like 90 years. And then for some reason, they'll have a few random years available. All right. So curious question now, where you had mentioned a little trepidation of going to Tuscaloosa or Opelika to these big campuses, but then you end up going to New York after
Right.
graduation and interning for Southern Living. Is that accurate?
Well,
Or was
I
that-
interned for Southern Living in Birmingham.
Then you went there for Us Weekly.
Right.
That's when you went to New York.
Right.
So let's
right.
go. Let's go to that point in the story of now. I would say New York is a bigger, grander, maybe more scary thing than those campuses. But by then, had you just gotten comfortable, kind of in your skin, and
Oh, for sure.
and you're
For
ready
sure.
to make the leap?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So now let's kind of discuss what how you came across that option that you were considering, like post graduation, post internship. Hey, I'm going to New York.
So I had always, even when I was younger, dreamed about going to New York. I think I read a book where it recommended that everyone, at least at some time in their life, should live in New York 1 year. And so that stuck with me.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I was fascinated with the fashion industry and all of that. I had already interned at Southern Living, so I had gotten the magazine bug. And, I'm a firm believer in just God kind of putting things in your path and those little reminders, and when something just keeps repeating itself in your life, that you need to pay attention and explore that. And for whatever reason, people starting in college had always said, you should live in New York. You should live in New York. You need to work for a magazine in New York. It was just something that kept being repeated to me. And so my friend Jennifer, who was in the beauty pageant, she had moved to New York. And I decided, you know what? She's doing it. I can do it too. And I started interviewing at different places. And then I did not have a job, but I decided this was now or never kind of thing. My now husband and I had started dating, and to me, this was something I needed to do on my own before marriage. And so I just thought, this is now or never. I need to do this. And with her living there, she let me live with her until I found a job. And
That's awesome.
and then we had, so the amazing thing New York gets this rap that people are rude and not friendly. The amazing thing I found was as soon as I told people that I was moving to New York, it was like everybody wanted to help me.
Really?
And everyone, you need to talk to this person, you need to talk to this person. And all of a sudden I had this huge network of people in this city that I had never been to. And so when I went up for interviews, that one of those interviews was with Glamour magazine, and that had happened because of someone I had worked with at Southern Living. And then that interview at Glamour magazine, the woman was so very nice, but she just felt like I needed more experience. But she said, I'm going to put you in touch with some people at Us Weekly magazine because I think that's going to be a good fit. And so that's kind of how that came about.
So, you were doing, what were your responsibilities? So somewhat at Southern Living, was it the same? Were you doing short articles, short features, and just kind of a contributor?
So at Southern Living, I worked on the cooking school and the cookbook section.
Okay.
So I was in the test kitchen a lot, testing recipes. We had a whole recipe team of people who would cook things, and then we would test them. It was really quite amazing. And then I would facilitate just the organization of those different booklets.
Okay. So then that certainly helps you have a resume. You have some experience, right? That if you hadn't done that, do you think you would have it would have worked out the way it did in New York for you? If you know what I mean? Like if you had just come straight from college and had nothing.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
That's a good question. New York is very tough, and so I think people can do anything they put their mind to, but certainly having that magazine experience helped tremendously.
Okay. Right. So then what's the interview like at Us Weekly? What are they telling you? Hey, this is what we're going to have you do, and you're thinking, okay, I can handle that, or I'm going to have to fake it till I make it.
So I was willing to do any and everything, and it was made quite clear that what I would be doing was grunt work and whatever anyone asked me to, and that was fine with me. So we would transcript articles, we would sit in on editorial meetings, we would pick covers, and then I might be having to run to pick up someone's boots from the shoe place. I mean, that was a normal day.
That sounds like The Devil Wears Prada. That girl gets put through the ringer, right? And
people just, at that point in time, you did it for the experience. It was that important to you to just have those experiences. And the people at Us Weekly at that point in time, the editor was Bonnie Fuller, and she is a legend. And the publisher was Vicki Rose, and these both these women were just notorious in the editorial, the magazine world. So
you just made a comment about picking covers, so let's do this. I think I have it ready here. There's some covers from 1990 or 2004-ish. Were you there at 2004?
That 1990 comment.
No. My mind is scrambling with all this stuff.
So 2002, 2003.
Oh, I missed it by a year.
But some of these look very, very familiar.
Well, some of them actually could be mixed in. But it's just, I mean, what's it like when you're sitting in the boardroom? Because this stuff, there's like I'm not saying this is, what's the one that's really, not Reader's Digest. The Inquirer, right? This just like, you look at it and you're like, this is ridiculous, right? It's just, and people, maybe they buy it, maybe they don't, but I'm always amazed sometimes at these, what goes on in these meetings that leads to like, hey, what we're putting on the cover.
Well, so this was an interesting time in history because it was during the Us Weekly People cover wars.
Okay.
So this was a thing. And we were so competitive with People magazine.
Yeah.
And, I like how my former boss put it. And, I can see the guilty pleasure in both those magazines.
Yeah.
with People magazine, you may have celebrity gossip right next to a very just heart-wrenching story. And my boss was like, I just feel like if people want a guilty pleasure and just something they don't really have to think about, they don't want a gut-wrenching story behind it. They just want the celebrity gossip. So that was an interesting take just on human mentality,
So don't really even go there.
Right.
Let's just stick to kind of figure out what is it why are people buying our magazine?
Right.
Is it the salacious stuff? Right.
Let's do this well, and you would go at that time too. You would go to the beach or the pool. And, today everyone has their cell phone in their hand. At that time, they either had an Us Weekly or a People magazine.
That's true.
That was it. They were holding it up, just diving into it. And another fun fact, too, is that Us Weekly is owned by Jan Winter Media. Well, Jan Winter started Rolling Stone.
Oh.
So pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So going back to like this one, Teens Gone Wild. Like, were there times though when you're in these meetings and you're picking covers and you're just like, I can't get on board with this.
Oh, sure.
This claim or this is a lie, right? It's where I'm not saying that they're lying. Maybe they are, or there's an element of truth, right? And you just exploit that element of truth. Like,
they were pretty good about not being salacious.
Okay.
Like the Inquirer or TMZ or some of those. They were pretty good about keeping it more positive, if that makes sense. What I would find interesting is sometimes I was specifically called in for my opinion because I was from the South. And there was certainly this awareness of we're kind of in a bubble here in New York. What does real America want to hear? So that was neat.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So did you get any assignments? Like, did you start getting some writing assignments and stuff there, or to kind of really, hone your craft?
So I worked part-time with the editorial department. And then my full-time position came under Vicki Rose, who was the publisher. So we were on the ad side. So there were some pretty cool meetings, and we would have luncheons with celebrities and things like that. But a lot of it was, how do we get American Express on board? How do we get
so you're doing
Banana
some sales,
Republic, like that kind of thing, and putting those pitches together. We also got invited to Fashion Week, so that was my first Fashion Week kind of experience. That was cool.
Now, when you say on the ad side, were you creating the ads, or you were just trying to sell?
Right.
Sell advertising.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Any memorable celebrity moments?
Antonio Banderas.
Really?
Yes.
Like, went to lunch with them?
I had a luncheon in the office. Yes.
And how
with
was
the
he?
team?
Pleasant guy?
Very much.
Gosh, that was pre-Shrek, right? Or did Shrek come out?
No, that was pre
Puss in Boots. Not that he's not known for other things, right? That's the one that just comes to mind. That's pretty cool. So then you're there till 2003.
Right.
And now, then there's a 4-year gap because you don't start MyScoop until 2007. Is that right? Does that sound right?
2007, 2008. Right.
So then, so clearly I'm trying to set up the fact that now when you get to like starting MyScoop, which is down here, and it was in Birmingham.
Right.
Now you're into the writing, right?
Right.
And you're cranking out content.
Well, no, that's not necessarily true. I moved back to Birmingham to work for Birmingham Magazine, and then I worked for Rob Report Magazine, and both those were on the ad sales side.
Okay.
And so I really got a very well-rounded experience. So although I had this tremendous passion for writing, I kept being steered into the business side of it all.
Okay.
Which would play tremendously into starting MyScoop, because I then was able to put all those experiences and passions together. And I knew that if I'm going to do this, I have to have advertisers. And I had a lot of those connections already. But then I also got to write and put lots of content out there.
Yeah. So I guess that's kind of a rare thing then, right? When you come across someone who's entrepreneurial minded, you kind of want to start your own thing, but you have to have had that business experience, or how do you generate revenue? How does that work, and having the right connections? But then once that gets going, well, then you have to have the content side.
Right.
And I think that's where you felt like accurate that you knew you could do it. You may not have had that necessarily as your job all along the way, but you knew you could do it. Right. Right. Does that sound fair?
Yes.
And did you also have some people close to you that were helping to contribute? Friends or I shouldn't say friends, just associates or former coworkers that you wanted to bring into this?
Oh, sure. I had several friends or people I had worked with. Maybe they worked for a PR agency, or that I brought in with the MyScoop, just for advice and ideas. And I might ask them to write a piece for me. So I tried to bring as many people in as possible who seemed excited about it, who wanted to help spread the word about it.
So what was like the last straw where you're like, okay, I'm doing this? You probably toyed with the idea for a while. Maybe it took a while to materialize. So when's the right time?
So when I was with Rob Report, it's a very male-centric magazine. And that, to me, just made me want to do something more for the female. And so that's why MyScoop was started. Is at that point in time, we did not have online media geared towards the modern Southern woman. In fact, it could be argued that we didn't have very much media at all geared towards the modern Southern woman. So.
Gotcha. Okay, so I think I'm piecing this together. So the MyScoop really bears out of you're a Southern girl. You're not gonna. It doesn't matter if you live in New York, right? You're not gonna take the Alabama out of Amy,
right?
But New York gives you some good experience on how the cutthroat side of things, right? That's the business side of things that prepare you to come down and say, okay, well now let's look at the market. We're missing. There might be Southern living and some other stuff, but what are Southern women's style, high class style, right? Which you get exposure to while you're in New York and seeing that is the fashion, capital of the world, arguably, compared to other countries might say different things, but at least from the U.S. Now you start MyScoop. What were those first few months like when you kind of just started out? What month was it? It was in May of, was it not, or 2007, correct?
So I started blogging in the fall of 2007.
Okay.
I was pregnant at the time. I had found out I was pregnant. And so that was another catalyst is, I want to do my own thing. I want to have the flexibility to do my own thing. Everything at that point in time seemed to be going online. And so my husband jokes that I went into the office and 10 minutes later I came out and I said, well, I started a blog. And so the blog was started in the fall of 2007. And then in 2008, it became a business, and we had the website, and it was, more of a formal business at that point.
Do you want to see some cool testimonials?
Sure.
These are kind of fun. Let's see how it looks on the screen. Okay, this looks pretty good. I highlighted some of them. There is no one in this region who knows fashion and style better than Amy Lemley Bailey. She is the expert on anything style related. That's pretty cool.
It's pretty good stuff.
There's a bunch of them, but I want to read this one. It has been challenging to find an effective way to teach the upscale female demographic via traditional media outlets. MyScoop has provided the means to connect and communicate with powerful females, women who work hard and therefore reward themselves. Utilizing non-traditional marketing such as MyScoop to reach women who make significant purchasing decisions is an effective alternative to traditional media. MyScoop allows Adams and Ford, I guess was a client, to provide relevant messaging to a targeted demographic of sophisticated women by approaching them through a medium that is applicable to their lifestyle. That's very well written.
It is very well written.
Gossip Girl was my first. So tell us about the Gossip Girl event. That's kind of why I wanted to bring up that testimonial was to.
So we had events throughout the year. We would do large quarterly events, and then we might have smaller things, a trunk show or a book signing or things like that. But we were known for having these larger 300 to 500 people events at different places in Birmingham at least 4 times a year.
Really?
Yes. And so Gossip Girl was one of those.
And what was the premise of the event? Like what were the
I'm trying to think. I believe just a more just fun, sophisticated event to dress up, and I think we had a contest.
Okay.
Yes. And of course the Gossip Girl TV show was very popular at that point in time.
So they showed up, wear something that might win an award.
Right.
That might be trend setting or just like, wow, captivating. That's remarkable.
Right.
And then enjoy some good food and maybe some good Southern food or whatever, right? Different cuisine.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
We were joking the other night. I missed Downton Abbey, and I was thinking, wouldn't it be nice to? Maybe I was joking about this at work, to have like a valet and a staff and a butler and all this stuff, and you dress up in your finest attire to just go downstairs and eat dinner. I
would love a Downton Abbey party. I love that show.
There's a good idea.
Yeah.
That might not be in my wheelhouse. I don't mind if you steal it.
I did not watch it for years because I thought, oh gosh, that just looks kind of boring. And then after watching several series that just kind of, made you feel a little icky, my husband and I started watching Downton Abbey, and we were like, this is so nice.
Yeah.
These are just nice, good people living nice lives. And it was just lovely to see that moment in time and manners and politeness and all these things being customary.
It is kind of interesting when you look at, in a way, how we're somewhat hypocritical as a society when, hey, we want wholesome stuff for our kids and we want this and that and we need to shield them from all these bad things. Yet at that time, like the number one show was The Sopranos.
Or Ozark or something like that.
Lopping people's heads off.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, wow. The zombie stuff was going crazy with Twilight and everything that came out of that, and like eating people and whatever. It's like, what are we doing?
Right.
We say all these things, we preach all these things in our everyday life and how we raise children, but yet at night we've like lost our minds with what we watch on TV.
Right.
Here's I like this one. I simply love the magazine. I have read your bio and several others and am quite impressed with your experience and that of your staff. I know I will enjoy checking out the Scoop in the future. Keeping my home and personal fashion up to date with today's trends is extremely important to me, and I love that I have a new source of information. Thank you for the Scoop. How awesome is it, right? When you receive these via email or text right?
Right. And what incredible validation that you're doing something that people connect with. So much so that they strangers take time out of their day to tell you. Mm-hmm. And so I think that speaks to the void we had at that time in that kind of media for a younger Southern woman.
Let me do this. I'm gonna pull up one more, and I really want to focus on that last one that's highlighted. I'd really enjoy your fashion comments. So, if I may, my wife Wendy's in the studio, and she had like a color consultant come and work with her, and she has a whole color wheel.
I love
you don't mind
it.
me putting you on display here, but it's very helpful when you go shop. And
right.
she'll ask me my opinion, like, hey, there's this top. Does it match one of these colors? And you put the color thing. You're like, that looks spot on.
Right.
But like, what kind of comments were you giving? Like, give me kind of a typical. Are you just evaluating? Are people sending something into you and you're like giving them, you're critiquing?
I think we were just talking about different trends at the time and where to find them locally.
Okay.
You didn't have to go to Atlanta or Nashville or New York to find good fashion. You could find them locally. And we would pair different things. And so being a third party that wasn't the boutique saying, well, here's a shirt, pants, and accessories. We might take one boutique and grab a shirt and another store and so helping people figure out how to style themselves and put outfits together.
What are your thoughts on some of these, I guess, like the Marshalls and the Ross and the TJ Maxx?
Oh, I mean, who doesn't like going to one of those and finding a steal? I don't go often, but I certainly go, and I have kind of a list and certain things in mind when I do go to those places.
How we'll talk about your family a little bit later, but like how much. I have boys, and it seems like, well, I have one girl, she's in college, but 2 boys in high school, and there's definitely been a informal dressing down. There's not a lot of style anymore. It doesn't seem amongst our youth, right? They're wearing pajama pants and they don't even really wear jeans. It's like they're wearing athletic clothes, and even the girls,
right?
But is there? But what I don't talk to them about that I probably would get more from a female, or they just don't care, is like, do you get bullied if you're not wearing the brand names, or has it gotten to a point where the brand names are so dang expensive that everybody's shopping at TJ Maxx or Ross and trying to save a buck? Like, is that something, is there a brand conscious, a brand awareness amongst our high schoolers?
Oh, for sure.
Is there still?
And, the girls love the Lululemon, and it's interesting because, like you said, some of these things, they don't have a lot of style behind them, but they're clamoring for these certain brands, more so than I remember being aware when I was growing up. It seems like they are very aware of fashion brands, skincare brands.
Really?
Yes.
That is definitely one area that I am just out of touch. I don't know, right? And it's when you grow up, you grow up in it, and you're very sensitive to it, right? It had to be Gap jeans.
Right.
It had to be an Eddie Bauer backpack. It had to be whatever, Banana Republic shirt. You remember Eddie Bauer? He had like a lifetime warranty on those backpacks.
Right. It's a big deal.
I don't think I ever had one. But at the same time, I got one funny story.
I don't think I ever had one either.
When I was very, it wasn't like we were blowing money, but if I could, like, Mom, can I get Air Jordans? Because everybody has Air Jordans, and wait till they're like the last year's model or something. But there was, I don't know if you've heard of Kmart. We didn't really.
Oh yeah, we used to have.
Did you have Kmart?
Mm-hmm,
we didn't have Walmart. At that time. This was late, mid '80s, late '80s, early '90s when I was like, middle school, high school, and we would just make fun of anybody that was wearing something like, oh, that's from Kmart. That's from Kmart. That's how you made fun of someone.
Right.
So there's no way you would ever get caught shopping there or buying something there.
Right.
Well, one day I was at Kmart with my mom, and I see like the clothes section. I never even looked at the clothes section. Mm-hmm. Why would I do that? And I see this shirt. I'm like, I'm kind of like looking at it.
Right.
Like, okay, would anybody know that's from Kmart if I wanted to get it? Because it's cheap. Right. That's
right.
It's really attractively priced. And so I get this long sleeve shirt and I wear it the next day, and I go to the bus stop, and immediately people are like, did you get that at Kmart? And I'm thinking, I can't believe this. How do they detect this so fast? Like, I'm looking at it with like objective. I want to give this a very objective review. Like, there's nothing about this shirt that's any different than what I would have gotten at Gap.
Right.
But it has a little bit different insignia or something, logo on it. And now immediately I'm being made fun of, and I can never wear the shirt again.
Unbelievable. Kids.
They're mean.
They're so mean. They're so mean.
So there's a couple, this is the one thing I was saying about grinding and stuff earlier. And I think this is just from your blog, but I just have, here's one, trouble finding that good job, become an entrepreneur, right? And you've got some advice about, hey, it's hard to keep up with what degree gets you into this field, but then things change and that field is no longer desirable. So where does that leave you? Well, you might as well work for yourself, right? So I think you're bringing to bear that you went through that process yourself, and now you're sharing that with your readers.
Right.
And then there's one about technology doesn't replace relationships. And I think this is timeless advice, right? Or
Right.
something we're still struggling with, where you say, well, technology may be changing, but social skills remain the same. You have to know how to communicate with every customer you have. The business that survives in this world is one that knows how to Twitter relevantly and also knows how to shake a hand and make a proper introduction. And that was written in 2007, 2009.
Right.
But here we are 14 years later.
We may need to republish that one.
You might want to repost that.
Right.
And
some of these are good reminders.
This is just a reminder for the audio listening audience. This is definitely an episode where you're going to want to go watch the video, because we are going through stuff that's on the internet or pictures and things. This is a heavy. I have a lot of stuff prepared that it's in the video format. But I guess one of my questions right away is, what was that like for you? What kind of pressures were you putting on yourself to get content out there? And I think I've always been very appreciative of those in radio and television, because there's that 24-hour cycle.
Right.
And or whatever it is, but then the newspaper, the same thing. I grew up with the newspaper, so no matter what, that thing's going to show up at your door.
Right.
And you have no idea what pressures they were under to get that thing out and get the layout and the editing and all that. So here, what kind of requirements or expectations did you give to yourself for how often you wanted to publish and how broad you needed to be?
So we were posting every business day at that point in time, so Monday through Friday, and I can't say that it was all good content by any means. In fact, looking back, I wish there had been more emphasis put on quality than just getting things out there. But then part of the fun thing about MyScoop too is that we were doing some fluff pieces, some pieces specifically done to make people laugh or get their attention. But I think that I could have been practicing and writing more and developing my voice, which of course did happen.
Yeah.
But we were so focused on just simply getting something out that I think it was good to get something out daily, but there could have been a better focus on getting quality content out there too.
Okay, so part of the reason I brought that up too. So then this is really a marketing exercise, right? I feel the same way with podcasts, right? Like, okay, well, you represent the fashion industry. You probably represent more of the women's demographic. I'm a guy and I like sports, and I've had some sports people on, but what if I interview the person that's bringing the zoo to North Alabama? What if we interview this person? So it's kind of like, well, what are people interested in? And maybe you were kind of doing the same thing, where you don't necessarily have to, on one hand, you might be critical of yourself because, well, maybe the content wasn't such good, but you're also testing what those people are really latching onto.
Right. And a big thing we were doing was, the content was hyper local. So we might do a lookalike, and we would take a local person from Birmingham and then say what celebrity they looked alike, and people like that. They got a kick out of it. Or we might do the best dressed. And to do that on a hyper-local level, as opposed to what had been traditionally done, which was, well, celebrities, that's who's the best dressed. That was a beginning of a shift in our society, too. Social media was starting to emerge. And so all of a sudden, people were caring more about what was happening in their own cities and backyards than they did celebrity and national news. And so that was interesting too, because now, of course, we're at a point where mainly what people want to know is what's going on in my own hometown. And sometimes maybe they'll watch national news. So,
well, it sounds a lot like the reason behind this podcast.
Right.
And actually, I went back and I was reading the original email intro that Allison did in introducing us, right? And she had made this point of saying, hey, we talked about the podcast, and I think that what you're doing is very similar to what your magazine is about.
Right.
City Lifestyle.
Right.
Where, and that, in fact, well, I'll read it later, but in fact, even just the way it's written, where it's like, hey, you're just focusing on the good.
Right.
And want to focus on good stories.
Right.
And I have the same approach, hyper local.
Right.
Because I'm not a celebrity that started a podcast. I'm not an athlete that started a podcast where you already have notoriety, exposure. People know who you are.
Right.
I'm just a guy that moved here a year ago.
Right.
Well, how?
Right.
Then it's about, well, why not? Like, no one cares about me. You know, they're going to care about the guest, or they're going to identify with the guest first.
Right.
Right. There's more people here than I do, and over time that's changing. Or I'm getting to know people, but at the same time, like, well, but yeah, to your point, why can't we focus on just what's here in North Alabama, what's here in Huntsville?
Right.
Right.
Well, and you know this too, but the South doesn't always get the best treatment by the national news. And so to be able to say, actually, this is the story. And we live in such a very, very unique place because there are people on both ends of the spectrum politically, but we all seem to get along here, and we all seem to support each other, and it becomes much more about this incredible place that we live called home, as opposed to who's right or wrong. And I think people, they feel that when they're walking the streets of downtown, or out and about, or at an event, or at a neighborhood function. And that's another thing, you know, I love Birmingham. Moving back to Huntsville, I see the extreme, is it loyalty? Is it engagement, enthusiasm? These food truck rallies we have downtown that bring thousands upon thousands of people. I mean, it's quite remarkable to live in a place where so many different entities and different people feel very supported.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to ask you about how on the opposite side of the spectrum, then you have somewhere like New York City. Cutthroat, competitive. Did you feel like people were did you feel like you couldn't trust anybody in the workplace? They were trying to undermine you or take credit for your work, or, you know what I mean?
Well,
was it a wake up? How much of a wake up call was that?
It was a different, moment in time also. I think women especially were very competitive of each other in those workplaces. And I enjoyed it and navigated it pretty well. I also wasn't trying to claw my way to the top or anything like that. But I think we've seen a shift, too, in that type behavior because women are very supportive of each other right now and applauding each other's hard work. And it's a nice place to be, for sure.
Yeah, I noticed... I was at this event last night and I won. It was a commercial real estate event.
Okay.
We rent from Copt. Copt is the property management for Redstone, the gateway.
Okay.
Outside Gate 9, right? So it was fun. And I win this like a koozie and a pin, and a little raffle. And it said South Huntsville. And so I was thinking, and I've talked about this concept of like tribalism a lot, but like to live downtown, like you're proud of downtown. Mm-hmm. But if you live in South Huntsville, then you're probably, and you had to compare, then you're going to choose South Huntsville. You're going to be more proud of South Huntsville than downtown, right?
Right.
Or if it's Alabama versus Georgia, then you're at Alabama. So you're always putting on that hat or supporting of what means the most to you.
Right.
Right. And then you get into your high school boundary and you're at Huntsville High, right?
Yes.
And now you're like super proud of Huntsville High, and everyone else is second place type thing. But then those same people that like at Grissom or whatever, well then you can be pals with them and associate with them and have pride in something else you do. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
So we're always kind of like, I don't know, like I'm over here in Madison versus Huntsville, but it's North Alabama. Okay, cool. Now we're all putting the same hat on again, right? Now the zoo's coming. Great. Let's all help each other out.
Right.
You know,
Right.
so but at the same time, I think you're right. It's just the influx of so many people, I think, that are bringing like life's lessons. Like, hey, wouldn't it be great if we lived in a community and we really appreciate each other? There's all this struggle going on in the world. Can we behave differently? And I really do think we have that here.
I do too.
Okay, let's get into City Lifestyle, and I wanna understand. Is it like a national? It's like a national brand.
It is.
Okay, so this is somewhat like being a franchisee, if you will, hanging off of the City Lifestyle.
Exactly. So
Okay.
I am the franchisee and the owner of Huntsville City Lifestyle.
Okay, so how were talk about how you were approached with this idea?
So I always, try to have projects and different things going on. And this summer, I was pretty full force with some of those. And then, out of the blue, the end of August, I was having coffee with a friend, and she said, I know the publisher of this magazine in Birmingham, and the parent company is looking to come to Huntsville. And I told them that the person they needed to talk to was Lemley Bailey. And my first response was, why did you do that? I have other things going on. And she said, well, I think you just need to talk to her. And so I happened to be in Birmingham for other meetings, and I thought, okay, I'll give her a call. And so we met. She was lovely. And she told me more about, the magazine and how it operates and the parent company's role and all those things. And even then, in my head, I kept thinking, well, who would be good to do this? And I started thinking of other people. And on the drive home, I had sort of thought, well, maybe. But then, no. And so talked myself out of it. And when I got home, I told Bo. I had not said a word to my husband because it was that insignificant of a thought. And I said, let me tell you what my friend Lindsay was the one who initiated this whole conversation. I was like, let me tell you what Lindsay's gotten me into. And so he looked at me very puzzled, and he said, are you sure you don't want to really think about this? He said, I don't think there's a better person to do this. And so that began the series of conversations with the parent company, and also just a lot of soul searching and prayer. And it just seemed like every time in my head there was a hard no, that there was this path opened instead. And so the really kind of interesting moment was we went to church one Sunday, and this was another point in time when in my head I was like, no, this is just not a good time for me. And we went to church, and I opened up the bulletin, and the sermon series, which, typically it's, forgiveness, learning to love, those type things. The sermon series was learn from the locals. And so I nudged my husband, and I was like, look at this.
Sign.
Are you serious? You asked for a sign, and I guess you get one. So
let's look at the website. I have City Lifestyle. So I'm going to anticipate in your mind what the appeal here is. They City Lifestyle, the franchise, takes care of the look and feel, the website. You don't have to do any of that. You just have to provide content for Huntsville.
Right.
Now, at the same time, what I think is also pretty cool about this concept is, well, you might live here, but you're going to vacation. If you're into skiing, you're going to go to Colorado. You're going to go Utah.
Right.
You go up to other things that Alabamians might do. Like,
Right.
okay, we like to ski. Where are you going to go?
Right.
You can go to the Rocky Mountains. You want to go to the beach. We like the Panhandle. We like, the Alabama Gulf, whatever.
Right.
That's where people go. So then you're mixing in some of that content here too. Like even I think within Huntsville, you're going to get some vacation ideas.
Right.
Or, oh, by the way, you got a bunch of snowbirds that are going to come here, during the summer, and then they go back wherever, during the winter, vice versa.
Right.
Is that accurate with it? Were you looking for, how do I go about doing this? And it's not that much of a time drain and effort that I have to put into this, and I can just focus on other elements of being successful.
Right. And a lot of the content are things that I was already doing in some form or fashion. And so, with MyScoop, I often talk about Huntsville and the things I love about Huntsville. I freelance travel write. And so there were several just alignment of the stars that made this idea of publishing a magazine for Huntsville just a lot easier and smoother, for sure.
Okay. Yeah. Do you want to walk through this issue?
Sure.
All right, let's do this.
It.
I'm going to change the camera. Now we can see better. There's the in hard copy.
Yes.
The new magazine.
Yes.
And one of my first impressions is just the overall quality, right?
Thank you.
The quality of the way it's laid out. It's simple, yet elegant.
Right.
I think it's not busy.
I like that.
It's very, it's high end. Definitely, appealing to a higher end, and speaks to the quality. The photography is fantastic.
Thank you.
And then I think we can step through it. We'll step through it digitally.
Okay.
But is there anything you want to just comment on, just on the hard copy version?
Like you said, the paper quality, the matte finish. There's several things that we just haven't really seen in town yet, and so to be able to bring that. And of course, it's a monthly, and we do not have a monthly magazine. And so that was another thing that was really appealing is, you travel to Birmingham or Nashville or Atlanta, and there's tons of monthly magazines. And so with our size and just the incredible residents that live here, the intelligence factor, I mean, you name it, why don't we have a monthly magazine? We deserve a monthly magazine.
This is the maiden voyage issue, right? This is the first issue.
This is the very first one.
I'm going to zoom in a little bit more.
Okay.
Let's talk through the cover and the design elements. Oh, yeah. Well, I'll get to that. So we'll get to thank you, Wendy. The question was, where do we get it? We'll get there. But right now I want her to discuss, because I'm sure it was very purposeful, right? The placement of all these objects on here. So why don't you talk through that?
So I had a dream about this cover. And originally, in this dream, the girl was jumping over the moon. So it was sort of a take on the Hey Diddle Diddle, the cow jumping over the moon, right?
Okay.
And so I love the idea of a big moon being right there on the front of the cover. And then Jessie Andrews, she is the artist who created this. And another thought I had was, wow, what if we can turn this into a mural? And so she's one of the big muralists in town. She creates a lot of the different ones that you've probably seen. And
down off of Governor's, is that the Art Walk and some of the other places?
Yes, and downtown also.
Downtown, all right.
And so when she first sent the artwork back, the woman jumping over the moon, it just was not working. And so, but everything looked beautiful. I mean, the graininess, she's got different stars, like the cotton, how she did that, like everything is just very striking. And so I have my little brain trust of people, and I sent it out to them, and I was like, what is missing? And, you never know until you start talking and getting ideas out there, what's going to come back to you. And my friend Jennifer, who lives in Los Angeles, she is not in a creative realm. She's a lawyer.
Okay.
But immediately she texted back and said, put her in the Artemis position. You've got the article about Artemis. Why not put her in the Artemis position?
There you go.
And so then with that, we, of course, have her shooting towards Orion, which that in itself, Artemis fell in love with Orion. Orion was mortal. Orion dies, and then Artemis shoots him into the stars, and that's how the constellation was created.
That's awesome.
And then, of course, the rocket, the mission is Artemis, but the rocket was Orion. So
What about the monkeys and the we had the Blue Ridge in the background.
So you may not know this story yet, but the monkeys are Baker and Abel, and they were the first beings in space. And they lived here in Huntsville.
I did not know that.
Yes. When I was probably kindergarten, we took a field trip to the Space and Rocket Center.
Really?
And at that time, Mrs. Baker still lived there. She was alive. Yes.
And then you have the building, and there's some purpose in the stained glass.
Well, that's actually there.
That's there.
So that's the building where Beezer is downtown, and that is exactly what those stained glass windows look like in that building.
Awesome. So. All right, so I'm gonna switch over, and we'll do the digital walkthrough now of the actual what's inside.
Okay.
So we just looked at the cover, and we'll just highlight. There's 44 pages,
right?
And then it'll be on. It'll be 22 clicks, right? If we want to go through the whole thing, but you just kind of tell me where you want to stop.
Okay.
I'll just click through, and then if you want to, we'll just stop where you want to comment.
Okay.
No. Oh, actually, this. So I love this shot. What is this? Your home?
No. So this is actually one of our apartment complexes that my husband developed.
Okay.
And so that is the clubhouse. And Hawthorne, who manages this apartment complex, decided to place the ad. And so
the walls are black.
They're very dark blue, but almost black for sure.
I love the royal in the lamps. That's a hot color, royal blue.
Right.
I've never done beadboard or a wainscoting type thing, but I love that look.
Yes.
Anywhere.
Me
Right,
too.
Wendy? I'm too scared. I do a lot of my own stuff, but I'm too scared. I think I'm going to mess it up.
Oh, you could do that.
I think I could.
Easily.
Even stuff just like the details of the 6 pictures there, the way they're hung.
Right.
I've come to really appreciate decor.
Well, good.
And that is like striking. Like, wow. That is really well done.
Okay,
Well
I will
decorated.
report back.
Yeah,
they will be glad to hear this.
And I was kind of thinking on a funny level, like you realize that you're older when you watch like The Price is Right, and I would get excited only when there was like a car being given away. Now I realize they're like crappy cars,
right?
Like a Geo Metro or something that probably was a 4-cylinder and whatever, a piece of crap, but it seemed great. And every time somebody would get like the showcase where it was just furniture, you'd be like, oh, that's a waste.
Boring.
That's so boring.
It's like, no, furniture's.
But then when you get to a point where you're getting married or you're going out on your own and you're supposed to be independent. Oh, you start looking at furniture. Like I didn't realize how expensive it was. So on The Price is Right, I would probably rather have taken the furniture set over the car.
Right.
Because it's probably not even a car I want to drive anyway.
I feel you. We had those same moments as newlyweds. We had no idea how much furniture cost.
All right. Let's see. So here we are on to the next page. And again, just I love here's all of these areas in Mid-City. Mid-City is basically take out an ad, right, to showcase their stuff.
What a cool development. I mean, unbelievable, all that's going on right there.
I am interviewing Nadia.
Oh, good. Okay.
Are they RCP?
Yes.
Yes, RCP, yes. Right, developed Mid-City. And it used to be a mall. You went to the mall?
Oh, yeah.
When you were
it was the big mall. I don't know if you've heard people describe. So we had the big mall, which was Madison Square Mall, which came along later in my childhood. And then we had Parkway Place, which we still have.
Right.
But that was the old mall or the small mall.
Well, people were trying to explain to me what the mall, and in my mind I had the typical mall where you have like a Sears, a Belk that kind of are the anchors.
Right.
But it was 2-level. But so in my mind, I'm thinking of 1 level. You have Orange Julius in there. Mm-hmm. You have some store. You can have a number of stores that just go out of business constantly, but then you're going to have some that do well.
Right.
But then the 2 levels hurting my head on like what that looked like, and apparently it was a really nice mall.
It was, and all the big anchors at that time, Parisian, which turned into Belk, but ask any Southerner about Parisian. It's
really
it was such a great store.
My mother loves Belk.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's Belk, right? She loves Belk.
Mm-hmm. Dillard's. Okay. I'm trying to think. There were several big anchors.
Really?
Anchors there. Mm-hmm.
Dancing for her life. So now we're kind of getting into this showcasing people, right? In the community.
Our content.
Just like I'm showcasing Amy Lemley Bailey on the podcast today, right?
And we, when I very first signed on to do the magazine, I tried to think of things that what could I do that no other city in this country could do? And I thought about this piece, From Arsenal to Entrepreneur, because so many people, when they think arsenal, they may just think, oh, government work. But first of all, what they do there is so amazing, so incredible. I mean, what happens in the city is unbelievable. But so many of those people who may have worked at the Arsenal, and maybe they still do, also do very entrepreneurial things. And so Anna Ward was one of those who she worked with the Black Hawk division. And she talks about how that experience helped her start her own business. And so there's some pretty great lessons in that article too.
You know, I was talking to a guy from the FBI the other day, and a lot of the issue in relocating from anywhere to, in this case, to Huntsville, is, well, where's my spouse going to work if they have a working spouse? Right. And so the Bureau and others are really looking to Huntsville to say, hey, are you as committed? We're committing to come down there, and we're spending billions to build office space and a second headquarters. But where's the other industries that need to support in the community, right? That are not Arsenal. So there are more opportunities for, we can't just rely on automotive and the Arsenal and some other things, right? And so that's that kind of their call to, and maybe you're providing some attention to that, or just educating people on, okay, if you're not aware, there are here's all these other things going on. Right. That we're actively engaged trying to build up our community to support the influx of these thousands of people that are coming here.
Right. And it takes all those things.
Now, I think this is we like it spicy. I think this is something you wanted to spend some time on here.
Well, another one of those, just trying to think in my head, what content would make this unique, and also thinking about everyone who makes this city incredible, and something that if you asked almost any Huntsvillian, where do you love to eat? Most of them are going to name one of our Asian restaurants. And so I thought, well, why not highlight some of our favorite Asian cuisine? And of course, there's so many. I couldn't write about every single one of them, but we picked certain ones in this first issue to highlight. And I think what is also, and you kind of touched on this earlier with how you felt about interviewing people, to sit down and to hear each person's stories, it really does something to you. Not only is it inspiring, but it just makes you feel so good about where you live, because something each of these entrepreneurs shared was how much they love Huntsville. And another very unique thing is, of the restaurateurs that we interviewed, almost all of them were women. And so you think about that, because each of them had a relative or friend that convinced them, you need to move to Huntsville. Huntsville's amazing. So they did. And then to open a business, move from their homeland and open a business in a town in Alabama. I mean, I think it's incredible. I feel like we could all learn a lot from these entrepreneurs.
Absolutely. It's like all the people that you meet that came from New York, right? It's the same. They immigrated from somewhere and they started a laundry or a restaurant, right? And there's so many of those stories. And I was just thinking of, let's highlight some of these names, and I'll mention something. But let's let's see here. We have, and this is for us to we need to know all the places to go, right? We're still trying to.
Right.
But here's Thai Garden. I don't think we've been there yet. There's Viet Cuisine. And then there's Ding Hao.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And that has been in Huntsville over 30 years.
Really?
So it's pretty fantastic.
Kamado Ramen.
Yes.
Which one's your favorite of these?
Oh.
I'm assuming you've tried them all.
I love them all.
Yeah.
And I eat at almost all of them probably once a week.
Really?
Except Komodo, and I love Komodo, but it's just a little bit more of a drive.
Yeah.
And so that's the one that doesn't get eaten at every week, more like every other week or every 3 weeks. But they're all just so fantastic. And most of them will also tell you what a privilege it has been for them to bring different kinds of cuisine to Huntsville and use fresh ingredients and have these family recipes that are a little more healthy and, you know. Yeah.
I have a friend that was from Cambodia. And I was thinking, like, I would love to interview all of these people because there's usually a almost unbelievable story
of
how they got here. And he told me of all of his family members, only 3 of them made it because in the 70s there was that war and most of his family was floating dead in a river.
Wow.
And it was just bodies flowing and the river was just looked like it was blood. It was red from all of the blood.
Unbelievable.
And he lost everybody. It was only like his 2 uncles, mother and father killed, like everyone was killed. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness. And I've all of our circumstances are different, and some are just not even next level. It's like 10 levels of like, I can't believe it.
You can't wrap your brain around it. It's so
only 3 of them
horrific.
made it out. And he moved on to, and then what's really interesting, he ends up marrying someone whose father was wealthy. I mean, ran a, have you ever heard of Freddie Mac?
Yes.
Mortgages, right? He was like the CEO of Freddie Mac.
Huh.
And you just think like only in America can you make it here and only 2 other members of your family survive, 2 uncles. Mm-hmm. And you ultimately end up being supported and raised by community and church and stuff to get you educated and to get a job. And then you end up marrying someone who like, wow. Right. Like, he did pretty well.
Right.
It's just amazing to me when I sit back and I think about that story. Now I want to, I know that you had stopped drinking.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And are into mocktails. So I don't drink. So I don't.
Cheers.
But I'm not really into mocktails either. But I wanted to point out, at least here, you're going to give some recipes. You actually have some personal experience with that, right?
Right.
And, anything you want to comment on this?
Well,
is this going to be like a monthly thing?
I don't know if we'll do it every month, but I did think that this is a big trend happening across the world, and I had noticed locally more restaurants having mocktails on their menu, and so I thought, you know what, let's feature these, especially with the beginning of the year, and people are doing dry January and those kind of things. I just thought it was very, very timely. And, you know, now you even hear about these sober bars opening up. I think there's one in Nashville now. I know there's one in Atlanta, definitely New York and Los Angeles and Houston.
Oh, good.
So you hear this trend happening, and why not show that even our city in Huntsville, Alabama, is abreast of this and doing some cool things.
Good for you. Yeah, you know, I was thinking as you were kind of describing putting your ideas into this magazine. It's really no different than what you were going through just growing up with fashion, where you're trying to inject this new idea. Right? You come into school and people are like, what is Amy wearing?
I like that.
You know, and now it's like, okay, let me just hit you from a totally different angle with this magazine.
Right.
And
right.
then it will catch on, because you don't know until something. Sometimes you go in shopping. Hey, what are you looking for? I don't know, but when I see it, I'll know.
Right.
You know, and so sometimes people don't realize where there is that element that's being underserved until it's like, yes, this is it. And you may not even been actively looking for it until it shows up in the form of a magazine. And you're like, oh, this really resonates. Oh, wow, this is a really cool idea. Boom.
Right.
And then it takes off, right?
Right.
Then they start writing testimonials to you.
Right. Right. Well, and you think too about a lot of the things we're fed on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And so going back to the positivity, what can we do that highlights more positive things, more, things people may not know about?
Mm-hmm.
What's going to be intriguing for people to hear about?
I hope so. I know that every time I open up my internet browser, it's just the stories, and it's just the language too. Everything is so-and-so gets blasts for saying this, right?
Oh.
The NFL world reacts. Oh, really? The whole world is reacting to Tom Brady or something.
And
it's just garbage. But
it's
yet,
garbage.
It must be there because people are clicking on it, and we fall prey to it.
Right.
And it's really unfortunate.
It is. And until we stop clicking,
I know,
and do things differently, it's going to be just a continuous what we're fed. But I do feel like something is happening.
Yeah.
And you can see it in it's not just my magazine popping up. I mean, there's a variety of magazines that are popping up in cities across this country that are beautifully done. And so what does that tell us?
Yeah.
Because 10 years ago, we were told that print was dead. And so is it? Because you go into a grocery store also and you see all those magazines. There are more magazines now than there were 10, 15 years ago.
Really?
So clearly something is evolving. And whether it's being talked about on the screen, it's happening. There's a trend happening. I think a lot of people are over just the broken water main that is the screen, and they want something that feels more tangible.
Yeah. Well, and I wonder if it's similar. Do you think similar to fashion is cyclical, right? Certain things were in fashion in the 70s and they're back. Right. Or in the early 80s and they're back. Oh, gosh, there was something that was starting to come back. It was like those old, ugly ski jackets from like the 80s.
Oh, yeah, they're back.
And I'm like, I'm out. I don't care. I'm not doing it. I still think they're horrible.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you start thinking about print, and there's digital, and there has to be some sort of cyclical nature to it, even though we haven't lived long enough.
Right.
But there's got to be something that's happening where it's going to change somehow, some way.
Right.
And trying to anticipate that and being ahead of it. So I think you're kind of those are the visionaries that kind of see that. Well, hey, we are trendy people, and styles come and go, tastes come and go, or how we do things are going to evolve and change. And just like you said, maybe we come back to magazines.
Right.
Because there's nothing's going to replace that. I'd love to see photos come back and put in a photo album.
Oh, I know.
Because I don't know if I mean, like what external hard drive was all my photos on? I don't know.
Right. And then what happens to that?
Right.
Well, so not to be dark, but I think too, what if something does happen? How are people, decades, centuries from now, going to be going through rubble and able to find out, where was society and what were they doing if everything's just on chips and hard drives? You're
not going to have the right USB cable.
So we need some tangible things.
Right.
Yeah.
I go through that. I every one of these episodes is a considerable amount of data, right? It's like 14 or 15 gigs, which means I got to take it, put on a hard, some external somewhere, and it starts to get frustrating and they're all different. How do you connect them?
Right.
And it's a lot of effort to keep up with stuff that you don't want to lose.
Right.
And you're trying to preserve it, and it would just be so much easier, different ways.
Right.
All right, let's go back. I just want to give a shout out and ask you how you know Karen from the Wellstone, Karen Peterson.
Yes.
Because that's the Beacon of Hope is their big fundraiser that's
Yes.
coming up. I'm going to interview her technically, I think, in March.
Awesome.
So it'll precede that.
Oh, good. Okay.
But how do you know her?
So we have a lot of mutual friends that introduced us, and I am also on the Wellstone fundraising committee.
Okay.
And so that's how I know Karen, and she's awesome.
Yeah.
She is such an asset to this city. She's fantastic.
Yeah, she's cool. All right, and this is I love how you have this feature of this couple here.
Yes.
And I think that's a nice little ad.
Well,
right?
So originally, because it's February, we wanted to have 3 different love story features of older couples. Because for me, I want to hear the older couples. How did you do this? How did you get through this? What advice do you have? As wonderful as newlyweds and weddings are, you don't know until you've got several decades in.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the story behind that. And then, we ran out of space to have all the couples we wanted in there.
Oh, okay.
But the charades are just they're awesome. They're awesome.
Do you have any? Want to take a guess how long Wendy and I have been married?
15 years.
Almost 25.
Really? Nice.
I don't feel like I look
Nice.
old enough to say that, but I guess we are.
It happens.
Yeah. You have a hard stop at noon?
Close.
Okay. It
Not
flies by,
hard,
doesn't it?
But it does. This is
Right.
great.
Okay,
Very enjoyable.
Good. Let's see here. There's Vail. So that's kind of where I had pulled out you're sprinkling in this. I mean, it's still wintertime. People could still book their tickets and go out to Colorado. I love the Colorado mountains. I've mentioned on several podcasts.
The best.
I love Utah, but it's easier to get to the resorts in Colorado.
It is. And there's so much. There's so much in Vail. And for whatever reason, Huntsville loves Vail.
Really?
There's a little following
Huntsville.
there. Huntsville. And
There's your T-shirt you need to make.
I like that.
Huntsville.
And so it's somewhere we love to go every year. And there's so many people in the city who will travel out there to ski, which is kind of interesting when you think about it, that there's this group of Alabamians that are such avid skiers. And then another fun fact, Moe's Barbecue?
Yeah.
So one of the original founders of Moe's, which the original one is in Vail,
Really?
is from Huntsville. And they're all Alabama, went to the University of Alabama boys. Yeah.
Okay, here's my trivia question that I think I've asked 4 different guests, and only one of them was familiar with it.
Okay.
There's a chain, it's a small chain of pizza in Colorado called Bojo's Pizza.
Okay.
Are you familiar?
No.
Dang it.
We'll see.
Now what you
Maybe
do,
I could do a good
you're going to
guess,
fly into
though.
Denver, right? You get
Right.
on I-70. It's before the tunnel,
Okay.
and it's Idaho Springs.
Okay. I
You
got
gotta
you
go.
now. I got you now.
If you please, homework assignment, if you forget, just when you go back and watch this, you have to stop at Bojo's Pizza.
I think I
You will
know
not
what
be
you're talking
disappointed.
about,
It's
'cause
like an old warehouse.
We stop in Idaho
you?
Springs on almost every trip for gas or coffee or something.
Oh, it's so good. And you dip the like honey, like it's not the hot honey now, like hot honey, and they're putting like spice or whatever in there.
Yeah.
They'll give some heat, but it's so good.
Awesome.
And
Thank
there's other locations, but the one I know of is in Idaho Springs, and of course, if you're going to go to the resorts, you're going to drive past it,
Right.
on the interstate.
Okay.
All right, let me just see if
I
there's
learned
anything
something.
else I wanted to. Is there anything? Oh, well, we definitely have to talk about this.
Oh, yeah.
The people behind Artemis, and that really gets into a lot of what's on your cover.
Right.
But anything you
right.
want to, additional information you want to highlight on this?
Well, going back again to what can we feature that no other city in this country can feature, and of course our NASA people and all that they do. Which, growing up here, I truly, until doing this story, had no real idea what all that they do in the city. And so, growing up here, a lot of us would talk about how we live in the shadow. We just don't know. Like, we know it's there, and we get that it was instrumental in getting us to space, and they do a lot of really cool stuff, but it's just over my head.
You're not getting through the gate.
Right. And so to be able to, in the most layman terms possible, give people in Huntsville an idea, this is what the SLS, the Space Launch System, does. And in that article, I interview David Beeman, who is a second-generation rocket scientist. So his dad worked on the Apollo mission. And the way he talks about the city will just make your heart beat so deeply, because he goes into how it takes everyone in this community to make this community work. So from your restaurant servers to your delivery drivers, everyone it takes to make this city work, and how that this rocket that they've created, it's Huntsville's rocket. And we should all be very proud of the work that's done in the city.
That's awesome. It's true. And, you know, when you're not from here, it doesn't take long for it to become infectious.
Right.
And again, it kind of goes back to why we're proud of things, right? Now I'm like super proud to be in Alabama, and super proud of the work that's done here, right? Where you kind of adopt it as your own and brag to other people in the country, like, yeah, well, we've got all these PhDs here, and we go to, you know, we do hard stuff, like go to the moon.
Right.
You know, there's some pride in that.
Yeah.
Well, do you have any final thoughts or shout outs?
Oh, you know, I want to say thank you. That was very loud with my ring.
Sorry.
I want to say thank you to everyone who helped bring this to fruition. Not just, you know, my husband and support of my family, but my editor, Carrie Tate. She's unbelievable. She was an Alabama girl, moved to New York, worked in the publishing industry, moved back last year because she has 2 young children and wanted to raise her family close to family. And so having her move back a year ago, the timing of this, and also Jesse Andrews, who did this amazing cover, our photographers, Nadia Kidd and Eddie Herskin. And there's just so many people who believed in this and have just been such big criers of just fans and getting the word out there. So.
And going back to my wife's original question, where do you buy it? Or can we get it?
It is direct mail.
Okay.
So that is something the parent company they're in charge of is printing and distribution. And so they take certain zip codes and they mail it to those zip codes. And then we also have distribution at Honest Coffee, Mason-Dixon, Moe's Barbecue, some of the different hotels in town, including the AC Hotel.
So if you want to subscribe, just go to the website and subscribe.
Right.
Okay. That's awesome.
Thank you.
You're already working on your covers for your next releases, or is that?
So March is done. It's at the printer. It is beautiful. I'm so excited about it. It has a photograph on the cover. And then for April, we're going to do another art cover. And so I'd really like for at least half of our covers to be art, because I feel like that supports our local artists.
Yep.
You know, they're being paid to do this project, and then it gets them exposure to almost 60,000 people. So yeah.
Well, you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
And I think it's
thank you so much. So are you.
Oh, thank you. I think it's clear that this is kind of a you're at this stage of your career, and you're applying lessons learned, and like all of these things that are in your toolkit that are coming to bear in this.
Thank you.
And I think it's an interesting concept, this kind of franchisee model, if you will, off of something that if there's already brand recognition, but then there's that hyper local, so you're kind of getting the best of so many worlds. It's brilliant.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, again, thanks for coming in. And
Thank you, Troy.
This will release in, I don't know, a couple weeks. I'm kind of getting ahead, which is good. Sometimes I have some travel coming up. So I'll just follow up and let you know the target date. But hopefully by then, spring will, or I can release it sooner. If you would like me to release it sooner, I can probably do that if that helps you. Or if you want to time it with the next release, your next issue, we could do that.
Yeah. The end of this month would probably be fantastic because then the March would be coming out that last week of February.
Perfect. So. And then hopefully these clips help you promote and go from there.
Yes.
And then when you're ready for us to be featured in there, we'll be ready.
Yes.
And I will come much more in a different level of style.
Oh, I don't know. I like your T-shirt.
You know, I have 11 suits, and I have it's been a while.
Suits.
Well, I'm trying to lose weight. When I bought them, I was probably about 20 pounds lighter than I am now, but I've got like powder blue, I've got rose, I've got wine color, I've got rose color, royal blue, slate blue, you know, your grays and your blacks and all that and browns. But
I feel like you're going to have a tough decision deciding what to wear to our launch party.
I might. And right now I'm just trying to like get into them. And I've got some I've never even worn. Because I bought them and then I moved here and started eating all the Southern food and you know so it's hard to resist. But anyway, thank you so much, Amy.
Thank you.
And all the best to you and your family. And
thank you so much.
Look forward to having you on again soon.
Thank you.
All right, take care.